Well, hello there. My name is Grant, and I'm a math teacher at Butler Christian Academy in Savannah, Georgia. And I just wanted to record a short video demonstrating how to use imaginary numbers, just a brief explanation of what it is and how it's used. So you would use an imaginary number for something like solving the square root of a negative number. So if I draw here on the board, let's say you get this, trying to get the square root of negative 25. Now let's ask ourselves what exactly they're asking for here. So in a square root, what you're essentially asking for is what number. I'll signify it with x. What number multiplied times itself equals negative 25. Okay, and whatever number that would be the square root of something. So let's kind of maybe sidetrack real quick to do a positive number to give you an understanding of how to do that. So let's say that you are trying to get the square root of an easy number, 9, and I'm dealing here with whole numbers. So if you're trying to get the square root of 9, you're looking at what number multiplied times itself equals 9. And in this case, it would be plus or minus 3. Now, I put plus or minus, not just positive 3, but also negative 3, because, as you might know from algebra, a negative times a negative equals a positive. And also, you probably learned this very early on in your educational journey. A positive times a positive also equals a positive. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you get a square root of a positive number, the answer is going to be positive, negative, whatever number you have. Okay, so returning to our original problem, negative 25, how can you get the square root of a negative number? Okay, well, let's throw out some alternatives, and let's try 5 times 5. Okay, well, that equals positive 25. You're like, okay, well, then we'll try negative 5 times negative 5. Well, that also equals 25. Well, then you might, be inclined to say, okay, well, then I'll do negative 5 times 5, which does equal negative 25. However, that is not the square root. The square root needs to be the same thing. Okay, so in order to solve this, let me erase some stuff on the board. In order to solve this, mathematicians have come up with what they call imaginary numbers. Okay, so these are not real numbers, they are imaginary numbers. And once I erase this board, go back to the pen. An imaginary number is I. Represents an imaginary number. And an imaginary number is the square root. I equals the square root of negative 1. Okay, and so basically imaginary numbers have been used as kind of maybe a placeholder to help you solve the square root, cube root, etc. of whatever you're working. So to solve the square root of negative 25, I would do the square root of 25, and I would break this down into negative 1 times the rest that's left in this problem, which would be 25. Okay, so you're essentially just taking, and I don't need that. Let me see. You're essentially just taking the big whole number and you're multiplying it times negative 1. So now I got the square root of negative 1 times 25. And so this equals, okay, well, let's start with the latter number. What's the square root of 25? Well, it's positive negative 5. And then what's the square root of 1? Well, right over here, I have the square root of negative 1 equals I. So it would be positive or negative 5i. That would be your answer. So if you're ever on a test or a quiz and they're asking you, solve this, and you're trying to get the square root of a negative number and you're confused, you're going to be using imaginary numbers. Okay, let's solve one more. We'll throw one out here, maybe a little more challenging, but not too challenging. We'll say negative 2 times the square root of negative 49. So I have a number in front of the radical, and then we have the square root of 49. So how do we solve this? Well, first thing you do is you need to break down the square root of 49 into two different integers, okay? Or two different terms. Break it down into something times -1. So in this case, so what is times -1? Well, you just do 49, okay? It's not that challenging. And then you start working this down. So you got -2, and then what is the square root of 49? Well, it's going to be multiply, and this is kind of a small thing. Trying to make this bigger. This is, how about this? How about this? There we go. I'll do the old-fashioned multiplication sign. -2 times positive or negative sign. And then what is the square root of -1? Okay, well that would be I, dealing with our imaginary numbers. Then we just need to combine all of this together. -2 times, -2 times plus or minus 7. It's going to equal -14. And then you're going to have the I on the end. So you're going to have -14I. -14I would be your answer. Now, let's apply this to one scenario. We'll use trying to solve a quadratic equation. We'll try that. So let's say you have x squared plus 25 equals 0. Now, a quadratic equation is something with a where your x has a bigger exponent than just 1. A linear equation would be something like 3x plus 5, etc. That's called a linear equation. A quadratic equation has the squared in it. So if you're trying to solve a quadratic equation, we're going to use imaginary numbers to solve this. So x squared plus 25 equals 0. Well, you need to isolate x by itself, so you subtract 25 on the left side. What you do to one side, you must do to the other in algebra, solve an algebraic equation. So you're left with x squared equals -25. Okay, so far so good. So you get the square root of both sides because you're not solving for x squared, you're solving for x. And so the square root of x squared is x equals the square root of -25, okay? Now that's kind of a problem because remember, you cannot get the square root of a negative number. So here we have to go back and use imaginary numbers. So let's break this down into two things like we did previously. We do 25 times -1, and then we need to get x equals, what is the square root of 25? Well, it's, remember, positive and negative 5. And then what is the square root of -1? Then you would be left with I. So the square root, the answer, x in this particular quadratic equation equals plus or minus 5i. And we used imaginary numbers in order to solve that. This is not a real number in the sense that it's not on a number line. It's just an imaginary number. So hopefully this short video helped you out and was beneficial. Hopefully I can make some more videos in the short videos in the future, math videos that also shed some light on various topics related to algebra. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.